Welcome to the moment that changed everything, where we interview notable creative people to gain insights into how they got started and learn more about the moments that shaped them and their careers. Today we sit down with Craig Brownrigg, commercial director for Hobby Film. Craig started his career as an art director and writer, working at agencies like MacLaren McCann, G. Jeffrey & Partners, and Zig, before slowly making his way into directing. Now he splits his time between Toronto and Los Angeles, producing commercials that get people and brands to laugh.
No one who's good at directing is doing it because they think it's cool. Make sure that you're doing it because you love it.
In this episode, we talk about his transition from art director to getting behind the camera, his advice for those who want to do the same, and how to charm actors and DPs to shoot extra scenes during their lunch hour. Hey, Craig Brownrigg.
Hey.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You know, the reason this is the first time that I haven't prepared any questions for someone, but the reason I haven't prepared anything is because we actually worked together.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I don't remember, like, how many years ago was that?
I'm going to take a guess, and I'm going to say it was 1990.
Don't say it. See,
8.
No.
1988.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds probably about right, I think.
Yeah. McLaren McCann.
Yeah.
I think it was like Ford. No, it wasn't Ford. It was GM dealer.
Yeah.
GM dealer?
I worked, yeah,
Rogers.
I definitely worked on GM. I don't remember how long I actually worked there for, but I know that you were a freelancer for like ever, basically.
Yeah.
They used to do that thing. I don't know if people still do it, where it was like permalance or whatever kind of.
I had
is that still a thing?
Yeah, they put me in like some like, I would call them the equivalent of like portables at school. I didn't have an office so much as I had like a partition that was like affixed to a wall.
Right.
And me and Jeremy Carr would be sitting there working together on stuff. And then I think he moved on, and then they partnered us together or something like that to work on some stuff.
Shit, that does seem like a long time ago now that you say it.
Well, it was a long time ago, and I feel like now we're like finally, we're catching up. And I invited you on just because it's like, well, we're going to go out to lunch and talk, but we might as well do it for the podcast because, we got a lot to talk about in terms of advertising and film direction. I guess the place where I was going to start with you was that when I was working with you, of course, you were an art director.
Yeah, that's right.
And then, of course, now you're a commercial director.
Correct,
and we've had other guests on who have made a transition from different advertising disciplines and then gone into commercial direction. But you're someone who actually made the transition, has done it longer than you were an art director.
I did. Well, that's why I was kind of saying, like, God, when was that? Because, like, I've been a director much longer than I was ever an art director or group head or And so, I don't know, man, over time, I guess you just kind of like forget. Like, I was like, oh yeah, right. Like, that's been I've been directing for so long. Not that I forget what it was like in advertising. I absolutely remember it. But, it was long enough that it kind of gets a little bit like, you forget what year, where was where, or whatever,
I know we were talking a little bit off camera about how, you got into the business and, I actually went to school for this thing. A lot of people now you talk to, plenty of programs, university, colleges, and that's how they kind of this linear journey into the business. But for a lot of people years beforehand, they would just kind of fall into it. So how did you get into it?
I'm definitely, it is where I didn't just fall into it so much as like, I didn't even know it was like a thing, certainly you'd have seen advertising and there'd be like funny spots that you'd have seen, but I didn't know you could like be in advertising for like a job kind of thing. And I think I ended up, so I went to university, got the degree, then, went to art school, which was where I probably should have gone in the first place, because, I was always better at, drawing and stuff than I was at like math, whatever, but got the degree, which is great. And then went to art school. And when I was done art school, I was still like, so like, what do I do now? You kind of want to be like a painter, but then that's not a job really either. I mean, I guess it could, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I met somebody, I think I met this guy through my sister. I have an older sister who, was working in marketing, and she's like, you should meet this guy. I feel like he worked at maybe like Y&R or a place like that. And he's an art director, and you should have so she set up a meeting, and I went and met this guy, and I come into his office, and he's wearing like a New Order shirt or whatever, and he had like these posters on the wall and like his drafting table and spiky hair or whatever, and I was like, what the heck? Like, what do you?
Well, this
you
is a
work
real
here?
job.
Yeah, and it was in like one of the high rises, like somewhere on Bloor. So I wish I remembered where it was. Actually, I wish I remember who the guy was, so I could probably thank him because, he explained to me what being an art director was and how potentially I was qualified for this.
Because you went to university for an art related course.
No, not university. No, I just have like a general degree, whatever. But I went to art school, and so it's basically like you could build a portfolio, and then you could come and get you could sort of get in this way. So then you start kind of looking into it, research, whatever. I'm like, yeah, this might be a pretty cool thing, and it's kind of the only thing I'd be qualified to do at this point, So I did. I thought, I'll start trying to build a portfolio, of which I didn't have any at all. Because like even in art school, I think the only thing that I did there that you could put in a portfolio was like a toothpaste container, like mock-up, like Crest, like into like shit like that. We weren't doing ads in at
in art school.
In the school. No.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right. Well, in the meantime, through another friend, I found a job. It was like at a design shop, but really they were focused on this new thing called the, internet. Well, the internet was new, but it was one of the first companies that was sort of solely focused on like building websites or like even building like brands' presence on websites, Of course, I had no idea how to do that either, So, but they gave me a job and I think my salary was...
I'm going to guess somewhere in the 20s.
No. I think it was $17,500
nice.
was the salary, which was not great. But, of course, it was like, holy shit, I have a job, whatever. So, and even there, I didn't do anything. Like I related to advertising or even design. I was like, essentially like just an assistant, But I was around it, so I guess that sort of helped. One time, this is a true story. The guy who owns the place comes to me and says, "You have to go to my house because there's a squirrel in my living room, and like my cleaning lady's scared to death. So you got to go get the squirrel out of the living room." I'm like, "The squirrel."
This sounds like a trap.
It's like, I'm not doing. I went to school, I'm like, all right. So he hands me the keys to his like super fancy like BMW or whatever, And like literally his car costs more than like 3 years of my salary, And I drive out to his house and like, he's like, when you get there, like phone the office and, tell me what's going on. So sure enough, I drove out of the city, out to this guy's house and walked in and there was this woman who was in the library, of course, was just the living room, got a library. And there was a squirrel running around in there. So that was like my job. I had to get the squirrel out. So.
And what were you supposed to do exactly with the squirrel? Like, he just looked at you and said, "You're the type of person who could deal with wildlife in a home."
Yeah. Must be qualified because they didn't even know who I was. It was like, "Kevin, go get the squirrel out of my
Craig,
my living room." I was like, "All right," because I was always just doing stupid errands like that for them. Yeah. So anyway, I went in, I opened the window, and the squirrel just ran out, and the woman was like very thankful, and I just drove back to the office.
That's it.
Yeah. So. What happened from there is by then now I'm like, all right, I got to try and get into like a sort of a proper ad agency. So I started hitting up all the places in Toronto at the time, like, the big ones,
Because you were from out west originally.
Yeah, in Vancouver.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
But by this time, I'd moved here and went to school here and everything. So, I like sent, the portfolio over to Ogilvy and Cossette was pretty big at the time. Mm-hmm. They were like over on Yonge Street in that sort of...
Yonge and... Is it Bel Air?
Yeah, I can't remember. They had a whole building, and JWT, those kind of places, So I started sending the book to them, which I got no response from because it wasn't even a
I was going to say,
portfolio.
you still didn't have ads in your book at that point.
No. I mean, I would take some of the work that they did at the... I was trying to do it myself for sure, but like I couldn't do it properly. Like I had no understanding. Probably tried to look through some ad awards and go, well, they're doing that. I'll just like change the logo. I don't know.
Right.
Like it was shit. I didn't know what I was doing. And I was making up as I went along. And at the design place, the few things I did get to work on were just like, brochures for like drywall companies, Of course, I put them in the portfolio because that'll impress somebody.
Yeah, well, it's work. Work is work.
And it turns out that's not the case. And I know that because nobody really returned my calls or anything. So I saw an opening for an junior art director position in Calgary at Ogilvy, and it was called Ogilvy and Mather at the time. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's called. Is it called Ogilvy and Mather? I don't even know. I think it's just called Ogilvy now.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was called Ogilvy and Mather. So I'm like, all right, because I grew up in Vancouver, lived there when I was a kid, whatever. And I lived in Banff for a while. So I'm like, oh, Calgary, perfect. Like, still don't know.
I'll fit right in.
Yeah.
Undetected.
But I also thought, okay, like this portfolio thing is not working at all. And I didn't have anything to send the guy. So for the art director job, instead of sending a portfolio, I sent a portfolio, but in the portfolio was literally just a letter that I just wrote. And not like, I typed it up. It wasn't just handwritten.
You didn't scrawl on it.
Yeah.
Please help.
This is not going well.
Yeah.
And the 18 or 17,500 wasn't going very far. So anyway, I sent him the letter, and lo and behold, I get a phone call like from the creative director. And basically he was like, I've never seen an art director's portfolio that didn't have any art direction.
Yeah, he was like, this kid is really something. He's thinking outside the box.
Totally. Well, that's the thing. It came across as this clever idea, but the truth is, like, I just didn't have anything to give him. So I wrote this letter thinking, well, maybe if I just write this like funny letter, whatever, it'll help. So, sure enough, but now I didn't get the job right away. I still had to, the interview and all that stuff. So he flew me out to Calgary, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going on like a plane for work here. This is like big time, And I went and met the guy. Now I know it's the super long-winded answer, but this is sort of like the story you were telling before about, Jeffrey Roche hiring, the painter. Maybe it wasn't that bad, but there's this guy, his name was Trevor McConnell. I don't know where he is now. I wish I probably could track him down, but he was the creative director at Ogilvy in Calgary. And his thing was like, he would just hire people he found interesting, And I don't know that he found me interesting, but he thought it was kind of cool that I was an art director who literally had nothing.
Right.
And he was the only one, by the way. So, he offered me the job, which I was just like, kind of blew my mind, right?
Wow.
And, I think the letter may obviously helped a bit. It was kind of funny. And he's like, I could tell through this letter that, you'll come up with good ideas. It's like,
that's
okay.
Amazing.
Of course, at the time, you think that's how it goes, Mm-hmm. Of course, now I know that wasn't the case at all. But the rest of that creative department that he had hired, it wasn't huge because Calgary is a bit of a small market. But, there was maybe 4 or 5 teams. But like, so he hired me, and he hired this junior writer who's a guy named Rob Terry, who now is like the creative director at Rethink, and potentially one of the smartest guys I've ever. And ideas came so naturally to that guy. It was kind of annoying, because you'd be like struggling, and you'd be like, "What about this?" Like. So he partnered me with Rob Terry. It was Rob's first job and my first job, and Rob was like, he wrote movie reviews or something like in like Now or whatever the magazine was in Calgary.
The equivalent of Now out there.
Yeah, so Fast Forward or something. Anyway, and Trevor liked his movie reviews, so like called him up and was like. I'm now speaking out of turn. Maybe Rob will tell the story a bit different, but it was something along, hey, do you want to come work in advertising? Rob was just like, okay.
Sure.
Like, so then now the two of us are partners. Now there's 2 of us who don't know what the hell we're doing. And like, and here's your brief, go and like, work on these like TV campaigns, I remember the first project we ever got was for TELUS, which is like the phone. We all know what TELUS is now, but it used to just be the phone company out west.
Right.
And, it was for their new service called High Speed Internet, which was like a groundbreaking thing.
Right.
They had the internet. It was the high speed version.
Yeah, you had to do research on what the internet was.
Yes, yeah. And apparently it was the internet just faster as it was.
Yeah.
But that was our brief, like high speed internet, I'm like, this is the first project ever. Like 2 days ago, I was just like in a whole other thing and living in a different city, working in a design. So I don't remember what my salary was there. Doesn't even matter. But like, I just got this opportunity from Trevor McConnell, and I'll thank him forever. Because if it wasn't for him, I really believe that like nobody would have given. I'm sure I would have kept working on my portfolio, but I don't know. Man, it would probably get frustrating and give up or something. But he did that, and like I don't see that now. Like I said, I'm not in it as much anymore. But like. I don't see that or hear that story of people who were painters or wrote movie reviews or like had no portfolio. It's like, it was sort of, I hate to sound like it was a different time, but it was different. There was no art. There was no ad school to go to.
I feel like, I mean, when I graduated from college, it was the middle of a recession. And I always felt, I wouldn't describe myself as like, a glass is half empty kind of person, but I would say that, graduating during a recession and then trying to find a job. And I struggled for like a couple years to try to get a job in advertising, ended up working at like in the mailroom at Chiat Day before, and then kind of discovering, well, there's a creative department and there's writers and art directors, and there's this thing called a portfolio, and just was really lucky to have people help me out kind of and do that.
Yeah. Did you actually work in the mailroom?
I did. Yeah.
That's a thing, eh? It sounds like such a Hollywood movie. Like, I started in the mailroom, but literally you did. It
literally was like that. And I can remember a fairly senior art director at Chiat Day sort of saying that too. He said, "You're working in the mailroom right now, but you're getting to see all this stuff. And one day you're probably going to get a job, working in advertising. And you'll look back at this and go, you're living that weird story of like, I used to pick up beer on Fridays for the creative department, and now all of a sudden I'm part of that. And of course, at the time, you don't think that that's really going to happen.
God, no, ever. No, listen, when you're trying to chase the squirrel out of the living room, there's no
I thought you were going to say the guy in Calgary is like, you're the squirrel guy, right?
Actually, yes, that's the punchline of that.
Yeah,
I am the squirrel. I have it on the resume.
Yeah,
like squirrel removal. Those stories are great. They're such great stories, and I know other guests you've had on here too have these amazing stories, and I always love to hear like yourself and the people who take those opportunities and go on to these like great, interesting, long careers, all because of somebody giving them a chance or working hard in the mailroom or whatever.
I'm like you. I wish I could remember some of the. I remember the things that people said, but I don't always remember their names or whatever. There was a writer at Chiat Day who I was. On the weekends I was trying to, make ads and to make a portfolio, and then I would take them in, and if anybody would look at them and just try to tell me what I should do with them, and literally like a Sharpie and a piece of paper and like a bad drawing of a car and some headlines and stuff like that. And this, I just remember this one writer sort of saying, if you really want to do this, you can do it, right? And I thought it was such a weird and simple thing to say. It was like, well, what is it? Nobody says to like, a kid, if you want to be a surgeon, you can. It's like sort of like, well, it's a profession. I just don't, it's like, really, if I just focus in on and do it.
Yeah. And then you can. As it turns out, that person was right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. They say that to the little kid who wants to be a surgeon. Odds are that's not going to work out for them. But in advertising, it's like, you're good. You just need to.
Yeah.
It's like, what are the qualifications? I think that's what makes this industry, I guess, interesting is that, not that it's easy to get into because it's actually not, but like there's such a diverse group of people who find themselves in it. Some people want to get, it's weird. I grew up wanting to be in advertising.
Well,
nobody grows up wants to be in advertising. Oh yeah, okay, maybe Trevor. Yeah.
Trevor said that. He said he was in his, jammies watching commercials, and he would be like, "Wow, that's amazing! I really want to do that." I was like, he was the only person I ever met that was like, "Yeah, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to write ads." I was like, "Wow, that's really wild."
See,
really?
I mean, that's funny. Because I do remember that. As I say, nobody wants to, and I guess there's one.
Trevor's over there.
Maybe there's a handful, yeah.
It's me.
But everyone else seems to, like somebody wants to, be an artist or a painter or whatever, and then advertise, and we can make money, and someone wants to write, be a journalist, and they want it there, or just somebody was painting a house,
Yeah.
And I think the prerequisite is that you have to be, you got to be nice. That goes without saying, but if you're smart and you can figure the stuff out, you can be successful in advertising if you work hard. And so that creates this really diverse environment where it's not every single person went to engineering school and now they're engineers,
Right.
And I think that's cool. And it's why, I think, why I've made so many friends in advertising, but also like why it's just like always an interesting job, no matter what, if you go into radio or, directing more now, it's like always such a diverse group, which is great. And yes, Trevor is the only person who's ever grown up going, hi, Trevor.
Trevor, if you're listening, we both.
I was going to say, maybe you can explain who that is.
Well, yeah, I mean, if anybody listening wants to learn more about Trevor, you should just go back and look at one of the episodes, because you'll find Trevor Show and Phil there, and he can tell you in his own words how he wanted to be work in advertising as a kid.
Yeah, so he and I started to being he and I became partners at Ogilvy in Calgary because I was working with Rob Terry, and then they would just kind of like not split us up, but actually, I mean, that's exactly what happened. They just went, okay, well, you work with you, and we're going to bring this Trevor guy in. And I was like, no, I like Rob. Who's this Trevor, And then he walked in, I'm like, oh yeah, you're cool. So then we got along and became friends and did, I think, some okay work together. And then, as it is in advertising, you do a bit of work and then you get a better opportunity and so on and so on. And I loved Calgary. I definitely loved the mountains and all that stuff, but family and stuff back in Toronto. So I took the opportunity to come back, and then I would never say and I brought Trevor with me. I didn't, Trevor got here because he's good at his job, but I moved, and then I was like, hey, I need a partner. Like, why don't you move to, come live in Toronto? And which I think he wanted to also at the time. I'd say you'd have to ask him, but maybe you already did. Yeah. Then we started working together here in Toronto at a place called G. Jeffrey and Partners.
Okay. I think he did get into G. Jeffrey in his time there.
Yeah. That place, I mean, it was really my first sort of opportunity to see what goes on at a bigger place. At the time, G. Jeffrey was it was big. And my time in Calgary was amazing. Thankfully, I got to do it when I did. But, at G. Jeffrey was like, okay, this is like a whole different game happening here, And it was like, there were so many people that worked there that, you don't know it at the time. You just kind of walk in and go, oh shit, I got to work hard to keep up with all these people. But there's some really, really smart people working there who helped me really start understanding okay, this, it's not just as simple as oh, here's a brief. Oh, let's write something funny. Sold,
Right.
You had to think about it in a different way. And so, I got to work with people like Brett Channer and Robin Heisey was there. And they were both creative directors at the time. That's how big that place, 2 creative directors, right, cranking out all this work. It was really an amazing, like I said, it wasn't the first job, but one of the first, a great place to sort of learn it and grow and, start figuring it out, So after that, that's when I went to McLaren. Yeah.
Well, I think that everybody suffers from this, which is, when you don't know how good you have it. And I can remember working at places where I just felt like the same. Like my first writing job was at Y&R.
Yeah.
John Farquhar and David Adams were my bosses. Jane Pritchard was the overall head creative director.
Yeah.
And but just living during that time where there was such a thing as the studio. And in the studio, there'd be a guy who would make foam core boards of storyboards of television commercials that were going out. And then even working with some old, I was about to say old timey art directors. That's a terrible thing to say about some.
Because they're listening,
Yeah, that's right. If Ken Boyd, if you're out there, buddy, I'm not talking about you. But I mean, these are I mean, I would see on their desks the old the typeset headlines on boards, and nobody knows how to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And they were beautiful too. I mean, they were works of art on them by themselves.
Yeah.
And this was just something that was tossed into the corner after it was sold, and then really done for real.
Yeah, that stuff. Obviously, when I first got into it, the computer was already kind of taking over, but there were still some. Jobs that you do where you'd go to the, I don't even know what you call it, the printing house and look at CMYK things and color balance stuff. And there was typesetting and there were some creative directors who were they would teach you about that. Even though you kind of, they'd say, well, you got to make sure this, but really the computers do it now. So you don't, so it was kind of ending, but the craft of advertising that comes from that time, I think still persists now to this day. Just kind of you get at it a different way, and that was those people that I was working with, and starting there is where I really started understanding okay, art direction is more than just there's a craft to it, and because of things like those old timey people that you so rudely just called me.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't say that.
I know Ken Boyd's out there right now. Dear Steve Gardner, How dare you?
Yeah. In calligraphy.
Yeah. A beautiful, hate-filled letter.
It's so, I don't know why we're being, I've lost track. Oh, is that you realize, or I just realized then, because like I said, I didn't go to school for it. I didn't really know. I'd lucked my way into it. I kind of just was stumbling sort of blindly through it. That's when I started realizing like, oh wait, there's a craft to at least the art direction. Well, the writing for sure too, but in my case, the art direction part of this, and I got to like figure this out now as well.
I look at it like, I don't think human beings have changed that much in this short period of time. And yet technology is such that it's made that, creating work now is like, it's really short.
Yeah.
Like timelines are very short. No one seems to have any time. It's got to be done right now.
Yeah.
I think I look back at that time, creative teams would spend weeks, if not months, crafting campaigns.
Yeah. I
felt like it did translate to better work. I really do. I felt like if you've had the time to actually work on something for a period of time, more than 2 weeks, I think would lead to work that's more thoughtful, more strategic. Sure. I think you're probably more confident that it's probably going to work. All of those great things that come with time. And, I say that because literally working at an agency that had a fax machine and fax paper and like people would, I'm going to send you a fax, and you'd sit around this machine waiting for this, like, I remember the fax sound too, that or whatever that sound was.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was an amazing time to be in that business, because there's just, computers were just starting to kind of come about, and there was fax machines, but then we saw the fax machines go away, and it was still a time where, creative teams would get briefed, and they would take like weeks and sometimes months to come up with campaigns.
Most of the people that I worked for, like creative directors or whatever, they would say straight up, like, I do not want to see you on your computer. Which to me was great, because I really didn't know.
That's good, because I don't know how to operate.
I'm like, I was just going to go and open up Photoshop. Like, no idea. But, anyway, their thing was, they'd be like, no, you're here, for your ideas. And then, yes, in the execution stage, you're going to have to work with like photographers or, whoever, or the studio people to make it great. But like, do not go near your computer. And so, we didn't, because we weren't, literally we weren't allowed to, we had computers. So we'd have to, even for the art director, you'd have to like literally draw the layout, which, I could draw, thankfully. I know some art directors that can't even draw, but it was really about, if your idea can come across in stickman form, I feel this is like a cliche now, but like if it comes across in that form, then it's a good idea.
Right.
And like, at the time there was no rushing through anything. When you say it's changed, I have to sort of take your word, because it's been 15 or so years since I've even worked in an ad agency now. But, I know through the teams that I work with that that's to be true. We're doing a shoot, and there's like an art director sitting there with his laptop, just like tweaking things. And I look at it and go like, thank God, because like, I just could never do that. I don't mean like, I don't want to do it. I literally could not do those things. And they're like rushing because, it's got to do this and got to go here, so I see it. And I think you're right, is that, that time spent generally translated to, I think, better ideas.
Yeah, because I think maybe the emphasis maybe switched a little bit with technology, where then the crafting of the way that it looked, or the execution of it, was far more time spent on that rather than the actual idea. Because it would be difficult to walk into a creative director's office and tell them about an idea that was all execution. I think we all know that there are ads out there that are so slickly executed. There's not a big idea going on there, but they're just so amazing at executing something creative and compelling that you just, it's great. But you couldn't do that back then, because if it was flat, it was flat. And you just, don't worry, it's going to look great in the end, wasn't really going to fly.
No, because there were, at least in my instance, there was no creative director who would say yes to that. Because, there wasn't, you couldn't even go like online and go, like this, and show them a reference, because that didn't exist as a thing, like, so it was really, unless you had a solid idea, you were like, see you tomorrow.
I think one guest came on and said the one thing he did say was like, yes, you might have been able to get away with it if you had built up enough trust with the client. Like if you had a relationship with somebody, and you could go to that client and you could say, listen, I know that it's not painfully apparent from this layout what it is, but the execution is going to take it to that next level, and you're just going to have to trust me, and maybe they would, and that would be great.
Yeah, and that, you know, unfortunately, that was always I'm sure it is to this day, like a bit of a rare thing, that trust level, because again, I see it in the shoots where it's like, you know, that trust sometimes doesn't seem to be there between agencies and clients. And, you know, when it is usually when the work is better. But I think, you know, now it's more like, you know, there's a bit of a skepticism or something.
Well,
I don't know.
I mean, there could be, I look at it like there might be very good reasons for that. And I keep talking about this, and I'm sure I don't know if everybody agrees, but you know, there's the hollowing out of the middle of agencies and departments, right? So you have junior level, and then you have more senior level, and the senior staff is working on big things and putting out fires, and then you've got no middle. There's no intermediate level of creatives that are helping the younger creatives through that. But in that case, you might have a situation where the junior levels are going to put into scenarios with clients, and clients might go, hey, this guy, you know, this guy is a copywriter or a writer or an art director or whatever, but they've been in the business for like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years or something like that. Sometimes that senior level, I can remember this too. I can remember sitting in meetings after getting to a certain point in my career where what I was saying wasn't really that different than what I was saying like 10 years ago, but now people would listen to me.
Right.
You know, I was like, well, he's been around for a while. He must know what he's talking about now. Meanwhile, it's the exact same thing I was saying, right?
Well, you know, trust, that's always the theme, right? It's like whenever we had to present work, and it still absolutely holds true to this day, it's like, if it's not about like tricking people, it's about them sort of trusting that you know what you're doing, and that you understand it, and that, you know, you're literally doing it to help their brand or whatever it is. Right. You know, when there's trust, there's always better work, you know? And like, you know, I said, unfortunately, I shouldn't even say this, because like I'm talking as if I see it on a daily basis. I don't. But like when that's there is when it's always, you know, better, I think, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you know, and I think when it comes to trust with clients, I always did take it personally when I felt like a client didn't believe us when we said that we had their best interests in mind. Yeah. I know that with a lot of creative people too, it's like, you know, you can be seen as someone, oh, you just want to get that, you know, that piece of work out there because you think that you think the ad community is really going to like it, or your friends are going to think it's funny or whatever. You just really wanted to squeak that idea that had the, you know, the monkeys in the case of explosives into an idea. Yeah. But most of the time it was a genuine interest that it was going to work, and that people were going to notice it, and it was going to persuade someone to actually maybe buy something.
100%. I don't think I've ever seen a time when everyone's, you know, let's just do this so we can get it out and win an award. It's you know, first of all, it goes through so many layers internally anyway, and like strategy people and account people, like everyone always had the client's best interest, which is to sell shit, you know? Yeah. And like, I don't think I literally ever saw a time when that wasn't what you're trying to do. What happened is you'd land on a way that was really interesting or unique, you know, creative, whatever, to do that. And then that became the hard sell because, you know, you're like, oh, why? Because it's like, well, no, yeah, it's an interesting execution or an idea, but still, you know, we're doing this for the right reasons.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Just because I'm asking you to take a risk doesn't mean that I'm delinquent or not being responsible.
No, exactly. And, you know, the awards are obviously a nice byproduct of that. And like, certainly you see it sometimes with like spec work, you know, where it's like, clearly you did that, you know, just to win an award, or you knew it was going to, you know, but I have not seen somebody just be like, I just need to win. Let's just win this award. And, you know, who cares what the client thinks?
Yeah, if it tanks their business, who cares?
No, because then you just get fired, and like, no one wants to get ever fired, I think. I don't know. So anyhow.
So let's move on to your transition from being an art director into commercial work, because I think you said you might have had a story about how that all came to be.
Well, you know, again, it was like, you know, just like getting into the business, is that I had to sort of find a different way, into directing, you know?
Well, by the way, just to back up for a minute, when I was working with you, because after I worked with you, I headed to New York to work at Gray. But you were going through a very stressful time in your career because you wanted to move on from McLaren.
Yeah.
You really wanted to get out and I guess work elsewhere.
Yeah.
But you were in a transition there, and you also, I think at that point, had started a family.
That also happened. Yeah. I mean, stress in that, you know, when you have little kids, that,
You got to provide.
Yeah. You know, that just happens. But I mean, you know, I definitely at the time, looking back, I was getting, I think, a little bit restless with the advertising side, because I know now that I kind of wanted to do this other thing, but it was still like, I didn't quite know that that's what, you know. I know that I really loved, you know, the part of being a creative department where you could, like, you know, make the shit up and when you could execute it, you know. But as you know, and as every creative person now knows, there's like a whole other side to that, you know, to that job, which is, you know, dealing with clients and research and, you know, strategy things. And I was finding that part wasn't interesting me as much, you know. And in the meantime, I'd been working with a lot of directors because I just happened to work in places that shot a lot of TV, you know. So a lot of my briefs were like, you know, TV projects. And, you know, I worked at a place called Ammirati, which, you know, I don't know if you remember.
Sure.
You know, that place was unbelievable. Like, you know, Steve and Angus were the creative director. Well, Doug Robinson was the creative director, and Steve and Angus were also creative directors. But like Tom Gowdy worked there, and Chris Harrison, and like just like the most unbelievable creative people at the time in the whole city. And then, you know, me. It's just like, fuck. You know,
you were hiding behind a lamp, just
oh my God,
undetected.
Please don't see me. Like, what if they see me? Because you had to do work that good, you know. And I worked with, by then, because you're right, at that time when I was leaving, I didn't know, should I go away, you know, like get a job in New York? I didn't really know. And then I met Hayes Steinberg, who was at, he worked at Ammirati, and they hired me to be his partner there. Now, I know that they hired me to be his partner only after a couple of other people said no, but, you know, it's generally the sort of through line for my whole career. Right? It's like, well, Wayne Choi is not available.
Well, you're the third stringer, so get in there, pal.
Who's that guy? It's like, anyway, I am getting back to your answer. Is that at that time, working at Ammirati, Steve Jurisic, who went on to you know, run John Street, he was great because he was the first guy that really taught me about production. Like, taught you about it, not just like, hey, go do production and figure it out as you go. He would like sit us down and explain how we should, you know, watch a DP reel and like, you know, talk to directors, like things like that I just, you know, I didn't know. And then I was like, wait a second, like, I really like this. And I'm starting to feel like, you know, the more directors that I got to work with, the more TV shoots I got to go on, I was like, I think like, I'd be like, what is your job? Because like your job looks pretty interesting. And it wasn't just about like, oh, it looks cool. It was like, there were just things about it that seemed to be the stuff that I really liked. And, you know, then there was the part of the advertising side that I was like kind of losing interest in. Thankfully I had Hayes there because like, you know, he was just amazing at, you know, he loved the creative side of it, but he also loved like, you know, I'll go do that meeting. You don't worry, you know, you can stay behind, you know? Right. So, you know, I will always thank him for that because it let me just sort of do the things that I like, but you can't do that forever, you know? So I realized while I was working at Ammirati that like, maybe I need to like look into how I can become a director, you know? To me, the really important thing is that like, I always loved the sort of storytelling aspect of it, you know? And that was my favorite part of working in advertising and just in general, like, you know, it's like, it all started sort of coming together in my head, you know? Like, I think that's what I really would love to do and probably need to do. And then I started asking around as to how I would do it. And then, you know, it's like, come on, you know, like, because it's not easy. You know, you can't just show up one day and be like, and now I'm a director. You know?
And I think the other thing is probably a lot of commercial houses too would probably have like, you know, every creative team, there's always somebody who comes up and says, yeah, I really want to dabble in some commercial direction and stuff. And I'm sure they're like, okay, yeah.
I mean, honestly. And like, I've had that conversation with, I've lost count of how many people, you know, nothing wrong with that. I love that people are into it, but you know, there's more to it than just being it,
right?
You know? And as any production house EP or anyone will sort of tell you, but like, at first they're like, well, film school. I'm like, film school? Like I had been to school for like 8 years at that point. I'm like, if I got to go to 4 more years, anyone who goes to school for 12 years, you should really be a surgeon or something. It's like, I'm not gonna be director. No, I'm not doing that. So I'm like, well, okay, well, what else can I do? So, I just sort of set out this sort of long-term plan of slowly building my reel, just like slowly I had to build my portfolio. So what you said before is true, is that I had just started a family, my kid, like newborn. And so you can't not work and just like, so I'm like, okay, well, I have all this access because I'm in these ad agencies that are doing all this TV work and stuff. So I'll just like, get the directors that I'm hiring to teach me how to be a director. It's so simple.
Sounds like a pretty straightforward plan.
Yeah, it's so easy, but I did start doing that. So every time that we would hire a director to shoot, we worked on Labatt for a long time at Emirati, for example. And like, we would hire these directors, like these amazing, people. And I would always say like, they'd ask if I had any questions based on their like treatments or whatever. And I'd be like, yeah, I have a question. Like, can I come to the tech scout? Be like, what do you, of course, at the time, nobody would come to tech scouts. Now everyone does. But like, things like that. And I would just learn from who I thought were the best directors, because we got to hire the best people. Tim Godsell was a guy who I shot some stuff with. He's amazing. Like, everyone was so nice and they were so talented, and I was learning from them. It's like a PhD in this shit, right? So in the meantime, I was like, all right, now that I kind of understand how this works a little more, I'll go in and start shooting some of the stuff that we write, the small things, the really little projects, which, happen. And so by then Emirati I don't even remember what happened to Emirati, but it just shut down one day. That's like a whole famous story, I think. You should probably get those people in here and tell that story.
I should, because I don't know. I do know it folded at some point. I just didn't know what the reasons were.
To this day, I don't know. I know that one day it stopped, and it was like crazy and busy and tons of work and everything. And then it just like, I think it took about 6 weeks from the time that, the demise started till it was like literally the doors were locked, and which was terrible because there were so many great people that worked there, and you hate to see something like that just end, but life goes on, right? So, but I started to work at Zig with Elspeth and Lorraine. So they also had come from Emirati actually too, and they'd started Zig. At the time, it was, I guess, still fairly small-ish, and they were very, very supportive about giving Hayes and I because at the time Hayes was sort of doing it with me, the opportunity to actually direct some of the stuff that we were working on, which was amazing because not many creative directors, I think, would allow that, because, it's like, it's a full-time job directing something. So they're like, well, you got to do all of your work, and then plus you got to do this other work. So, no is a very, very simple answer to give, Of course, I was not going to take no for an answer. So it's like, I just kind of kept bugging them. I didn't have to bug them much because they were both very, very open to it. And like, Zig was an interesting place to work because, again, lots of talented people, but Elspeth, was particularly like, hard on the art directors, And I realized after the fact that like, it wasn't, she wasn't just being hard just because, she understood that like every detail matters. And, and I'm talking every detail, It was like, it would be crushing. But at the same time, you're learning all this stuff. And now, like I was talking about like Trevor before, like I'll thank her forever for drilling that into my head, because as I'm starting to be a director, you realize that these details are what makes things great. It's not just one thing, it's like every little thing. And as a director, you got to be on top of all of it. So, they let us start shooting some stuff that we had written there on like very, very small projects. And so it was a way just to start building the reel, because, really it's like a portfolio. You just need stuff.
And would you hire a DP to execute? Like, were you acting as director, or were you handy with cameras and?
No, yeah. I mean, I had no idea how to do that. That was the one side of it. Being a director, there's so many facets. bore you going through every detail, but the reason that DPs are there is that, it's a very different skill set. And like that takes time, and you gotta figure that out, because you want your stuff to look good. So you can't just like, I'll figure that out. It's like, potentially you could get a good gaffer or somebody to come with you and help you, but you need a great DP. So we would still bring in the proper crews for everything. We were just the only person the only thing we weren't doing is hiring a director. But aside from that, it was exactly the same as any other production, low budget production, which I didn't care, like we just make it work, So, we'd bring in these great DPs, and, we'd always have editors and amazing people on board to like make it look legit, because if it didn't, it'd be like, it's like when you're building a portfolio, if the finished piece looks crappy, then it's like, well, why even bother having it, So it started going, like that. And once you do one, then the next time you can say, well, I've already done this, check this out, and then you can sort of just build on top, because talk about trust, like, as cheap as you could do any TV production, it's still expensive, Yeah,
so, and great for them for giving you guys, for letting you guys do that. I mean, you're talking. There might be a small job, but it's still their client.
Oh yeah, no, right? And like real clients too. This is not like, I mean, we did something that the first thing we ever did was for Indigo, actually, I remember. And I mean, that's a legit client with like and so they're giving us the opportunity, but they're also taking a relatively maybe calculated risk, but still a risk, Right. That's why I say, like, forever, I'll thank them for that opportunity, because it's so easy to say no. Now, my personality is such, and by this time I'm so driven to be a director. I'm like, if you would have said no, I just would have found another way around it. But like, at least it made it a little easier, because what I started doing, and this is where it gets like a little, like, I don't mean sketchy. I didn't do anything illegal per se, I guess, but like, I was like, okay, this is good. But now the opportunities were just a little few and far between, So I'm like, I need to do this more. So what I would do is, when we had a spot that we would have, for like a big brand, for whatever it was, and hired, because they wouldn't trust us to do that, then we would go and I would just write other scripts, so that we knew on the day, like we knew who we'd cast, we knew where we were shooting, we knew the day schedule, whatever. And I would just literally write other scripts for just other spec things. And then at lunchtime, I would always befriend the DP and be like, hey, like, can I borrow your camera for like 20 minutes at lunch? And then and I might need like a couple of lights, or we'll just do it outside, or we can do it now, whatever. And then I would go to the actors and go, hey, I wrote this take a look at this script. Like, and by the way, here's a prop, and you just have to do whatever it was. Like, I just depended on the shoot.
That's unbelievable that you convinced them to do it.
Well, no, I mean,
were they like, what is this is a totally different script? It's
no. Listen, by the time anyone figured it out, it was over, because I'd have to do it fast. I get like one take, and so we'd have one shot, maybe you'd get two shots, maybe. We'd always keep the dialogue down to nothing, because then if you needed dialogue, then you needed the sound guy, like these type of things, which, anytime you had to add another person, it got a little more like, what? Especially if film crews, once it's lunch, it's like those guys.
They're union guys.
Yeah.
Like it's like, yeah. So would the DP sometimes help you? Or
no, every time, yeah.
He'd go out to wherever and just kind of go, well, I can't even believe the actors would do it. I mean, they're pretty, they're union based too. It's sort of like.
Believe me, I'm explaining like it was some easy thing, but there was a lot of like, huh, what? And we're just like, oh, we're just like trying this thing. Sorry, it's for my like, my buddy's birthday is coming. It's like any lie to get them to just be like, oh, okay. And then they would do it and be like, thanks. And then it was just over. Of course, the editor would get the footage and be like, what the hell is this? Like, like, why is this guy standing in a hallway, like playing a harmonica, whatever? I'm like, oh, no, I gotta go. And then, of course, the editors would do it. And it's like I said, it's bad because you could never ask. If you asked up front, the answer would be no. But if you do it, then like, what are you doing? And it's like, oh, well, I'm doing this. And they go, oh, okay. Because, keeping in mind, you're always very polite and very like, you just approach it the correct way. It's not like, fuck off, am I allowed to swear in this? I don't know.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I actually know. Yeah, plenty of people
I've probably
swear.
been swearing the whole time. I don't know. It's not like I was like, fuck you, I'm doing this. It was always like, it was the way you sort of handle it. So again, you just build a few more, a couple more spots, now a couple more spots. I mean, I think the worst thing that I ever did is a client called and they said they I'm saying this, I'm going, oh my God, people might not even know this. If I don't name the client anyway, the client phoned and they wanted to like change the super for whatever. And I was like, how about this? We'll give you a whole new spot. And they were like, you can do that for like, but we only have this much money. I'm like, don't worry about it. Like, I got this, you know? And then went to like my boss after and was like, and it wasn't Elspeth Lorraine, by the way. Cause I moved to a couple other places, pardon me, in the meantime, but like, hey, you remember that thing we're supposed to change the super? We're going to do all new creative. It's like, what? You can't do? I'm like, I've already, like, I literally phoned. Remember, you were going back to like the trust of the client. You know? There were some clients who by then we were, you know, kind of tight with, and like, yeah, sure. And then it's like, all right, well, now we have to give them a spot for like $25,000 or whatever it was, you know? So yeah, I mean, you just slowly, now I knew at the time that this was going to take many years, and it did. It took like, from the time I was like, I need to build this reel until the time I was like a director. I mean, I'm going to say 5 years, but it could have been 6 or 7. But you just got to keep your eye on the ball, you know, and just like keep going. So, which is what I did. And eventually I did get to the point where, you know, by then I was working at a place called Grip. Remember Grip?
Yeah.
The structure there was like, you know, you were your own creative director. So I didn't even have to ask me. We were just like shooting, you know, some fairly, you know, bigger things, you know, but enough that I have a reel, and I did a few, not spec, but like or, you know, like charity things. Hayes and I wrote this campaign for a group called, well, I think it was for PFLAG, but it was in support of same-sex marriage. At the time, same-sex marriage was still like, you know, not legal. And, you know, we heard this story about these guys who were trying to get married, and we're like, you know, this is crazy. It's so stupid. So let's just we wrote a campaign about supporting same-sex marriage, contacted them and said, we're going to write these spots. You know, if we could, you know, kind of get together with you guys and so they could run these things. And we did it, and we shot them and directed them. And so we wrote them, directed them, did the whole thing. And, you know, they turned out fairly good, I would say, you know. I mean, I'd love to take another crack at them right now, but that was where it was like, okay, like this can happen, you know? So I spoke to some of the production companies around town and was like, hey, you know, I've been doing this some of them had been helping me out already with the production. And the people at Radkey Films, Edie Weiss, and Scott McKenzie were very, also, you know, very gracious. And they said, all right, like, we'll rep you. And, you know, don't fuck it up. Right. Basically, which is fine. And then, you know, the funny thing about being a director is like, you're like, all right, I'm a director. And
now
then it's like
waiting for the boards to come in.
Yeah. When are the boards? I thought I was going to be shooting stuff. And they're just like, that's not really how it works. So then it takes another, you know, a little while to sort of get
for them to, because their reps got to go out and sort of say, and then find jobs that would be appropriate for a new guy.
Totally. You know, and then you just got and I mean, honestly, you start from scratch. Like you start as a junior art director and you build your way up to, you know, I became a creative director or whatever.
Right.
But you start from the bottom again, you know, as you should. You know, there is no like, well, I worked in advertising, give me like, you know, this $2 million, you know, whatever campaign. You don't. You start and you know, scrap your way through it and build again, which to me I was fine because at that point I was like, I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And
do you remember your first
shoot?
Yeah.
You mean without?
Like this is your first, you're getting paid as a director working for Radkey on a commercial that they.
Yeah. I did. I mean, there was a couple of little like strange little freebie things, you know, like that were like, you know, a corporate thing for one of the ad agencies, you know, like, but for the first, like, here's money, was for Toro Magazine through John Street. Which Toro Magazine I don't think exists anymore. After I did some ads and it shut down. So yeah, it was a Toro, like it was like a men's magazine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I don't think that because of my ads that those things that company shut down. Maybe I don't know if that's the case. I do not want to know the answer potentially. Yeah. But see, this was what's interesting is that Steve and Angus, who I knew from the Ammirati days, were very, very, you know, kind to me to say like, hey, we have this thing. It's small, whatever, but like. We'll give you a crack, you know? And stuff for people like that, you know, you need to be good at it, but you also need, like getting into advertising, like anything, you need somebody who's going to kind of just give you a chance, you know?
I've made this point before, you know, I think there's this, from an outsider's perspective, there seems to be this idea that, you know, it's a cutthroat business and people are tough and people will step all over you and all stuff. But there's a fair amount of really good people who just are just like, yeah, I'd love to see you be successful. And, you know, if I can help, that would be great.
I haven't worked with everybody that I used to work with, but like I used to work with a lot of people. So, but you know, there are some, you know, I could name a whole bunch, you know, that were just like, you're doing this right on. Let's like, you know, we'll give you a chance. Now you still have to be good at it. No one's going to do it because they like you. You know, they'll give you a chance because they like you and maybe see something in your work, but you have to prove yourself in anything, I think, you know, probably the same if you go over to Pirate. And, you know, it's like, it's not just like, oh, this is fun. They have to produce something that's, you know, good. And, you know, thankfully, you know, I don't want to say like I was so successful early on, but like, you know, these opportunities were great because they gave me a chance to show that I could do it, you know? Sure. Even Elspeth and Lorraine gave me an IKEA spot like very, very early on in my career, which, you know, I was like, I'll be forever grateful because it was an amazing spot. I mean, they always write good stuff and they wrote this incredible thing and they let me do it. Actually, it was funny because I realized now that I'm directing that I was I think I realized at the time, but I was probably not like the best art director, you know, like I think I was pretty good at it, but like, you know, I'd look around and I still to this day, you see stuff and you're like, holy shit, like that's really good, you know? You know, I see guys like Chris Harrison or what, you know, it's like, oh my God, you know, amazing. Yeah. And, but you know, I start directing, I'm like, ooh, maybe Elspeth says to me, like we're doing the shoot and she goes, you know, you're so much better at directing than you were at being an art director. It's like
backhanded
thank
and
you.
yet thank you with the question.
And yeah. She was being very genuine. She was like, you're basically saying you're doing a really good job, but like, it's like, right. But you know, I feel like I've been talking a lot about myself, but of course, I guess that's why we're here.
Yeah,
right?
you're a guest.
This is weird.
I like to bring guests on and talk about me the entire time.
Anyway, you know, you know, it certainly as you roll the dice a little bit when you switch careers, because this is an entire career change. It isn't, you know, yes, it's in the same world, but it's a different thing. You know, and I realized now that I've been doing it for a while, it's like, yeah, this is kind of what I'm supposed to be doing. It feels better. It feels right. I think I'm better at it than, you know. So, you know, it took a while to get there, but, you know, I think that all that hard work, because I mean, I basically had 2 full-time jobs for 7 years, you know. And ultimately, when it came right down to it, I knew it was the right thing. And you know, so far, so good, I guess. It's been 15 years now, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a very common thing for a lot of people who do something for a period of time to forget that they've been doing something for a period of time. Yeah. And then it takes an outsider to look at you doing that and go, wow, this guy knows what he's doing. I can remember doing that actually. Of all people, with my brother, you know, like he went off and worked in computers, and now he works in like computer forensics and stuff like that. You know,
that's so awesome.
Yeah, it's like a wild job. And anyways, I had something wrong with my computer, and I said, I you know, can you take a look at it? This guy, you know, pops the panel off, goes, you know, flips a couple of knobs, you know, moves some stuff around to snap. I'm like, where did you learn to do that? And he goes, that's like part of my job.
That's somebody doing it for 50
He's like, yeah, I got to take people's computers apart and I find out all the bad stuff that they're looking at. But yeah, you just don't think that you're gaining all these skills as you go along for years and years, and all of a sudden someone goes, hey, you know, you're pretty good at this, right? And it's a validation that you kind of go, okay, well, maybe I am in the right place.
For sure. And, you know, I mean, just the fact that you keep working is validation because you know, I mean, like any business, being a director, it's, you know, there's competition. There's some unbelievably talented directors out there who these creative teams who hire me could pitch somebody, you know?
Right.
I mean, I work along, I mean, directors don't work together, but like, you know, people on the rosters that I work with are like, they're unbelievable. Yeah. And I see their work, I'm just like, holy shit. So, you know, it motivates you to do better, but like the fact that you get boards sent to you in the first place, like, okay, I guess I'm doing something right. You know, yes, an award or 2 will come and go, I guess, but like, you know, the mere fact that you're getting up on work, I think sort of says it all. Like, I thought we were talking about this earlier. You know, at first I'm like, I'm a director. Like, I totally get this. Look at how funny this thing is. So most of the stuff I do is comedy, or it's supposed to be funny, whatever. But anyway, you know, you think you know what you're doing, I think, you know, And then like 10 years into it, I was like, oh, like now I know what I'm doing.
Right. Before you were like, it was like pantomime or something, like you were like going through the motions, but you didn't really know the depth of understanding.
Yeah. And sometimes, somebody said this to me just last week. They're like, every once in a while, everyone needs just like a lucky goal. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I'd never thought about it. Sometimes like it just bounces off the back of your leg and goes in,
Right.
And that can be true for being a director or a creative person, these things happen. But ultimately you need to put together a good body of work, because once in a while you'll get a great script and everything will just sort of, line up. But, figuring out the nuance of directing, there's so many facets to it, right? Like, you think you know it until it takes you a long time to realize that only now you know it. And then probably in 10 more years, I'll be like, oh shit, as it turns out, I actually didn't know, Right. It's like a constant, you don't even know you're learning, but it's, I look back at some of the scripts that I did early in my career and I mean, I still think the work's good and everything, but like, I think, God, I'd love to have another crack at that exact script, just to see what I would do different now because, I don't know that I certainly, I mean, that's the same with anything in life, but like, you don't know, like if I knew then what I knew now, whatever that's saying,
Yeah. Well, I think that's, it shows that you're like a normal person. Yeah. I think if you can step back and look at your work and criticize it and not be too hard on yourself, but look at it and think, I made some choices there and I could have made different choices and maybe it would have turned out differently and that might have been good. I think it just means that you care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. If you look at it and go, yeah, I did that, obviously made all the right decisions. There weren't any other option.
No. Yeah. I definitely, this is going back to what I learned in advertising through people like I mentioned Elspeth, where it's like, the craft of it and the detail makes a huge difference. And when you're doing these things that you actually enjoy doing, then I think the work gets better because you pay attention to the details that make it great without even kind of knowing that's what you're doing. So. Like I said, so far, so good, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect way to segue to. I usually like to wrap these things up by asking guests if they were going to give advice, what key advice would they give to somebody who wanted to do what you're doing? Because I think one of the things we email back and forth about was like, if you go online and look at your bio and stuff like this, it's like, hey, this guy's in Los Angeles half the time. He's in Toronto, and that seems really glamorous. And I think at first I thought you might have been in Europe or something. You got some representation in Europe, but then there's the reality of it all. And maybe if you could encapsulate that with what advice you would give, and also maybe dispel some of this idea that it is a glamorous scenario. I'm sure it's a lot of work.
No, hard. I mean, so what happens, I think, with most Canadian directors is that you start getting opportunities in the US, it's just kind of the way it works, and that started happening with me. And so I didn't set out to be like, I want to do this so that I can move to the States. But, you just started shooting at the time in Los Angeles a lot, And so then you sign with a US company and now you have a visa and now you're working there all the time. And so, it got to the point where like, I kind of had to, I didn't really like fully move, but you got a place down there because, you're just away a lot. And people always told me, if you're going to be a director, if you're going to be successful, there's going to be a lot of travel. And of course you go like, oh yeah, like,
I'm cool with that.
Yeah, that sounds great actually, and we do a couple shoots a year right now. So, but like, this is like a whole other level, you're constantly pulled in different directions. And, it's tough. So like, living in Los Angeles, at least part-time, is out of necessity. I get it, how it might sound like, oh man, that sounds great. But really, I'm away from my family a lot. And, ultimately I have a job that I love, there's no question. And, they pay me to do it. So that's nice. But, I do everything everything that I do, it's for my children, Right. And so unfortunately the things that I'm doing that I do enjoy, I'm not saying I don't, but like it takes you away from them. And like right away, I can tell you, like, I don't mean like, oh, woe is me, but like, that's hard,
Sure.
And so while Los Angeles sounds like so lovely. And it is, the weather's always nice, it's great, but you're also traveling to all these other places you don't see, on the bio quite as much, like you're in a suburb of Cincinnati, or you're in like the outskirts of Atlanta, or it's like, these kind of weirder places that, and not just throughout like the States, like everywhere, So on one hand, you think like, I've been very fortunate. I've got to go like to a lot of amazing places with interesting people, whatever. It's incredible. I'm grateful and thankful for it all the time. But at the same time, it's like, you can look at your year and go, and I was away for 9 months, of 12. And like, that part's not so great, So, you try and find the balance, but ultimately balance is impossible. And it's sort of, you got to figure out a way to keep it from being a major strain on your life, Again, I can't stress this enough. This is not like, woe is me kind of thing, but it's, it's not quite as glamorous as it may sound. I think sometimes people think like, oh, you're a director, like that sounds so great. Or like people might want to be a director because it sounds cool. And there's no question. Like for me personally, I do love the job, but like you have to also love the other things that come with it. You have to, first of all, you definitely need to want to, do the storytelling aspect of it. Because if you don't love telling stories, then you're not going to be a great director. Do you know what I mean? Sure. Like if you're getting into it just because you think it'll be cool to tell somebody at a party or something, like you will fail 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. It's not it. Then the whole other side, like the travel, the like dealing with like all the different agencies and producers and budgets and all like that. Like there's a side to it that isn't. Like I say, it's not all it's not just all glamorous.
Let me ask you this. I mean, I think you said you might have been coming from a pitch when you came here. Uh-huh. What's the batting average for like that kind of stuff? Like how I would always say when we used to put boards out and we would get treatments from, let's say, 3 different directors.
Yeah.
I would feel a little bit guilty sometimes because I could see the amount of effort that would go into a treatment. Like you're not talking about something that you just kind of off the top of your head develop. You're like, you've thought about it. I don't know how many days or a week that you take to actually come up with a vision for something. Yeah. But I would feel terrible about it because I'd be like, these guys, they're great and they're talented. It's just that this guy's to happen to say something that resonated more with us than anybody else.
Yeah. And, there's no, you don't know. Every creative team is different, right? So, and every job is different. So there isn't a certain thing you can say to win. Mm-hmm. It's not like I figured it out and I win. And you're always pitching against 3, at least there's 3 people. So you're presumably pitching against 2, but more and more I'm hearing more about like, we have like 4 and like every once in a while I'll be like, there's 5 on the long list. And you're just like, holy shit, because that stuff's a lot of work. You got to write the treatment. You got to do all the visuals. Now you have teams of people that help you with that. I would never sit here and say like, oh, I do, at the beginning though, you write your own treatments and you do the layouts, but the busier you get, you kind of have teams of people that help you. So I don't know, I did know when you work at certain production, I worked at a company out of Hungry Man in the US, and they keep fairly detailed stats on, what you pitch, what you that kind of thing. But, theoretically you should be getting 1 out of 3 jobs by the math. I think that mine maybe was a little higher. I think it was like 60 or something, because it certainly depends on the company you're with and who your reps are and stuff. But, you lose a lot of jobs. Like a lot of jobs over the course. You definitely do not win all of it. And sometimes you go on these like runs where you lose like, you
can't seem to get anything.
Oh no. And it's like somebody's just punching you in the stomach and then someone else will come along and punch you in the face, cause you're just like, oh my God. You don't know your schedule, right? Because like you're pitching a job that may shoot in like, I don't know. Well, I just went through this. Like we're going to shoot in Mexico City. It's like, okay. And if you get the job, you leave like 3 days later, So it's like, okay, well, can you come to this thing next week? Well, I don't know. I might be in Mexico City or I'm maybe just not doing anything. It's like kind of it's kind of a weird thing. And so you lose a lot. So you have to, it's not really about like, you need thick skin. I guess you kind of do, but it's really more understanding that you are not going to win everything. And some of these jobs, you put a lot of effort into it, like you said, and you get kind of excited about these boards, and then they just go away. You just like, you watch it just like, and then they're gone. And you just have to be like, all right, it is not personal. Like those people don't dislike me. You know, it's nothing against me. It's someone else, you know, it could be one thing that resonated with them, you know, right. And you're pitching against people who are like unbelievably talented. So you just like, all you can do is like, the general rule is like, you pitch an idea that you have, whatever that might be, and you just stick with it. And it's kind of like, if you don't like it, not literally this, but if you don't like it, like too bad,
right?
You know, and you did your best. You can't, if you try and guess what they're trying to like, they want you to say, like, you're fucked. You'll never ever win any job, you know? Hopefully it resonates and then you get it and then you move on, you know? The only thing that's good about commercials, I'd say, is like not the only thing, but one of the things that's good is like, you know, there's kind of a lot of them. So, you know, it's very easy to be like, oh God, no, I just want, and then it's like, oh, here's another one, you know, like, right. Oh, okay. At least I can, you know, as far as that thing about, when you say about Europe, what most directors have is like reps all over like the world, you know, so you can get opportunities from, so I'm repped in the US, I'm repped in Canada, the UK, Sweden, Amsterdam, you know, Germany, everywhere. And so then just, you know, you just want to expand, you know, so you can get opportunities from all over the place, just because it keeps it interesting or whatever, you know. You don't have to rely on just one country to sort of feed you boards or whatever, you know.
What do you see? We'll wrap up with this question. What would you like to see happen in your career over the next 5 to 10 years? Is there something that you're moving towards right now?
Yeah, I mean, you know, most. I guess the thing that I'd be working towards, as I think most directors who generally do commercials do, is like kind of moving into a longer form thing. Now, like, you know, with commercials, it's, you know, like I said, they pay you for it and there's always stuff coming in. And I think on some level I will always do commercials because I actually really do enjoy it, you know. I like working with the different teams in different places. You know, it's like, it's a new challenge all the time and I kind of dig that. With that said, certainly, like advertising, it's shrinking a little bit. Lots, you know, there's more and more talented people coming up. So, you know, you got to keep your work interesting and fresh. Like, so what I'm specifically doing though, is I just wrote and directed a short film. And, you know, so I think it was pretty good. And, you know, got into some of the film festivals, whatever. So, now I'm pitching that as a TV series. So, you know, part of being in LA when I, you know, started living there or whatever was like, you know, I got agents and managers and like long form stuff. And, you know, you pitch some feature film, you know, like over the time, it just kind of, you know, opportunities come up if you sort of try and pursue that. So, but I sort of felt like, you know, I realized when I was doing it, it was like how I got into advertising. I was like, I'm just going to create my own thing and, you know, try and go get in that way, as opposed to just like waiting for somebody to send, you know. I did pitch some movies and I'd read the scripts and I was like, I don't know, like it's good, because the type of movie that I would get as a new director, you know, it's you know, it wasn't Parasite. It was like, you know, I mean, it wasn't like straight up like bad, like frat boy B movie, whatever. But, you know, it was like, you know, it's like, maybe I'll just create my own thing. And that's what sort of, you know, led me to make this short. And I think just the top, it's about a single dad raising a transgender like girl. So I think the topic kind of resonated with some people, you know, and it's, you know, like I said, we're still pitching it and it's not like it's about to get on, you know, Netflix any day now, but hopefully. So, but that's the sort of goal, but all while still doing commercials, you know. I don't think I'll ever stop. I mean, maybe, but, you know, like I said, I kind of like it. So, yeah.
What advice would you give somebody who wanted to make the transition between maybe being an agency creative who really is interested in film and directing?
I mean, the advice that I would give, I would say, like, you know, make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. Kind of talked about that before, where like, don't do it because you think it's cool, because, you know, no one who's good at directing is doing it because they think it's cool. You know, they're doing it because they love the filmmaking side of you know, of it, like in all aspects of it. But, you know, I would do, like, if you know, if that is the case, then, you know, find a way to get on set in any capacity, like even if it's, you could go in PA and like just be around it and see how the whole thing works. And then like anything else, find a way to build your reel. I think that the benefit that people would have now, or benefit, maybe advantage they would have now that I necessarily didn't, is like, you can shoot and edit and stuff a little easier. Like when I hear the like shot on iPhone, like it is shot on iPhone, but it's like, there's like the Russian arm and the thing, like it's not really shot. But I mean, if you can write some nice, simple, some simple work with like a great, nice, solid idea that you can execute well with the technology, 5D or some camera that like still looks good, you can build a reel, but you got to make sure that it's something new and interesting, and you can't just do more of the same, because more of the same is already out there, So in a way, it's like very similar to how you'd get into advertising. When you build a portfolio, you got to build a reel. But while you're doing that, like talk to some directors, get on set, and make sure that you're doing it because you love it, not because like you want to tell someone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I
don't know why. It's funny to me because people have asked that, like, and I always think, like you said before, it's not really. I love it, but it's not like a glamour. It's people have, like, no. It's I don't look at it as like, oh, this is so cool. I look at it as like, I love this.
Craig, thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It was great being here. It was great to see you too.
Hey, you look great. Bye.
This episode has been brought to you by the National Advertising Challenge, North America's only brief-based challenge that sends winners to Cannes, France.